Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. And don't forget, Candid Frank live on YouTube. And Candid Frank Stanisci. And of course, Aaron William Freeland is our co-host, and we have so much to talk about today. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. We apologize for being late, but it wasn't us. It was
And
the
no, this time it genuinely wasn't.
this time it was the application. Anyway, let's get to what we're going to do here, and let's start with sports. And I guess we owe you an apology, especially you CFL fans. Aaron and I excluded the Canadian Football League, not because we were unhappy with the way games finished, but just because it was what happened. So the Elks beat the Stamps 25-23 to basically take the rubber. Well, not the rubber. They evened the series this season. The Labor Day game and then the post Labor Day game.
Yeah, this was actually decided on the final play. As time expired, Dean Faithful actually managed to put a 42-yarder through the uprights just to give them the outright victory. The Elks actually managed to blow a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter to Calgary. But, as it currently stands, by winning that game at 3-10, they actually still have a chance to get into the playoffs, which is, one of those, whoo, and then you realize who the competition is, and you think to yourself, what are the odds do you think they're actually going to make it, Frank?
There's two odds: slim and none. Well, they're just too far back. But here's the good news. As David and I spoke on our show, I had a couple of comments. People were really upset because I didn't rail on the Saskatchewan Roughriders for losing. We'll get to that in a second. But the Elks are in the position now to prepare really well for next year. I think they know they've got the makings of a pretty good team, and now what they have to do is get those players together, give them an opportunity to show what they can do, and then tune it up over the offseason. Calgary, on the other hand, the way things are going, they're kind of betwixt and between. You know what I mean, Aaron? They're in or out. Unfortunately, sometimes teams end up in that position. We see it in sports all the time, where you have an organization that okay, is this our last hurrah, or is this one of those things where these guys we'll give them one last chance? They've done enough for us to keep them together. That's how I feel about those two teams.
Oh, and you got to wonder how many times Calgary is going to try to run it back, and now that Bo Levi Mitchell has left for colder climates, I think, in Hamilton, and he's, it's interesting when you take away one of their biggest offensive weapons. I'm still amazed, actually. I'll be honest with you, that Edmonton is still in playoff contention at 3-10 because they're right behind Calgary at 4-9.
Well, the thing is, though, Aaron, they've got to catch Saskatchewan, or Hamilton has to really crap the bed on a regular basis, and they shouldn't do that. They should be able to. The way they played, I guess it'd be fair to say that Hamilton has played as well as Edmonton, kind of, sort of. Edmonton, I think, has had the better record in the last 3 games, 3 or 4. But I think Hamilton's a better team than they've shown. Calgary's the team that I think come next year, they're going to be a team that's going to struggle to make the playoffs if they don't figure things out. And by figure things out, I mean, it's very easy to blame the quarterback for the offensive woes of the Calgary Stampeders, but it's more than just it's more than just a quarterback, because the quarterback doesn't invite himself onto the team, and he doesn't arrange the way the games are going to be played. So there's some input on the outside of his little sphere of influence. But if he's being given a game plan that can work and he's just not letting it work, that's a decision that the organization has to make.
And the other thing to remember here too is, are they asking him to perform above his abilities?
Or expecting too much?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Tempering expectations, folks.
Speaking of expecting too much, the Saskatchewan Roughriders went into Winnipeg thinking they were going to have a game of it. I guess they expected a little too much.
Yeah, the Banjo Bull too. Electric Boogaloo did not turn out the way anybody expected. I wasn't expecting a 51-6 final. I'll be honest with you. That was
I
not
think
anything I saw on the cards.
I think the Saskatchewan Roughriders were strung along, or is
I
it
mean,
strummed along?
do you think maybe the Blue Bombers sandbagged it on Labor Day just to sort of set them up?
Oh, I just think what it is, really honestly, this is the Winnipeg team. When they play badly, they come back really angry. It's their season has been, mostly hot, but when it's got cold, it gets very hot the following game. So, this is good news for all the teams in the Canadian Football League, because it's not a 2-game series in the Grey Cup. you
Yeah,
know,
you don't have to play them again. Thank goodness. Holy
just
smokes.
piss them off and then leave, and then collect your money, collect your trophy, and move on. Yeah, that's the amazing thing about the Blue Bombers. When they play badly, they really followed up with a hard hitting game, and they did it. They did it then, and the Ticats proved that they are the better team, better than Ottawa. They've done it now a couple of times. They're quite far ahead of they're further ahead of the Red Blacks than the Calgary Stampeders are ahead of the Edmonton Elks. So um, the question's going to be, as you quite rightly alluded to, the Ticats could be out if Edmonton really cleans up their act and Calgary carries on, with the kind of record they've had so far this year.
I mean, the one relief, I guess, for Hamilton would be the fact that Ottawa's trailing behind at 3-9. I mean, that's small comfort, but at least it's some comfort, you know.
Yeah, and Ottawa has proven not to be as good as again. I talked about it with David on his show, and I can do this even better with you because I know you will understand exactly what I'm saying. The Ottawa franchises have the same disease. I mean, the Senators and the Red Blacks, they bring in great players. It looks like they've got a great organization, looks like they've got a great team. You come into the season going, this could be the year. This is the year. This could be the year. We thought this was the year. Oh my God, it's another one of those years. And both teams have the same scenario. You notice they're very similar. I could have started by saying, what's in the Ottawa water?
Well, in fairness to the Senators, they did manage to figure out the start and the end of their season. It was just the middle of the season that let them down, like a really disappointing sandwich.
Yeah, they were a
So
little fat in the middle.
yeah,
They need to, they need more core work, I suppose.
well, yeah, you got
So
to kind of feel bad for the Ottawa
yeah,
franchises in
Ottawa
general.
sports fans in general. I mean, it's the same disappointment. It's the same way that they really give you a belief that there's hope there, and then they just don't come through. And then worse than that, they start well, and then, like you said, they need a tummy tuck. Um, you hear about Aaron Rodgers, right?
Hmm.
He's like for 3 minutes, he was a New York Jet in the hopes for something like that. Four plays, 4 possessions, I think they said.
Yep.
Um, I didn't watch the game. I recorded it. I just didn't have the heart to watch it. Um, and they said all reports are, never has anything like this in professional football ever happened, where a player like of his stature loses his health and disappears. I'm going, oh, Levi Mitchell, Simone, not Simone, Mazzoli, Mazzoli.
Ricky
These are
Ray.
exactly. This is exactly what happened to Ottawa and Hamilton, right? It's the exact same thing. In fact, even the injuries are similar in how they happen. But you know, so yeah, so this was something that the Bills once again, um, they shit the bed.
They pulled defeat from the jaws of victory. I think is just, living down to their moniker of boy, I love losing Super Bowls. I actually had a friend who was there live. A friend of mine who actually comes to
At this
Argos games
game,
with us. Yeah, was at that game. Um, eh, you know, they actually managed to get an Argos chant going while leaving the stadium.
oh, no kidding.
Oh
Good.
yeah.
Well, there's enough Southern Ontario folks there. A lot of
Hmm.
Toronto folks are there,
Yep.
so it's
There
a
was
it's a busy place in that regard.
I almost feel bad for some of those Milwaukee bar patrons. I don't know if you
Yeah.
heard about this one.
Yeah. The prediction didn't quite pan out.
And the thing is, people ran up their tabs, man, because as soon
Yeah.
as Rogers went down, all of a sudden everyone was like, let's go. And yeah, that touchdown in overtime,
Well,
you know,
drafted 5th overall, their quarterback is not a hidden commodity. He's a commodity, just he hasn't proven himself, and that's why they brought in Aaron Rodgers. So he gets us at the proverbial second chance.
it's one of those situations where you hate to see it happen to Aaron Rodgers. You hate to see it happen to anybody. Maybe not so
What?
much Aaron Rodgers, but
What?
you hate to see it happen. And then Schaefer, of course, gets his. I mean, their quarterback gets a second opportunity, and this is something that he had to grab onto with both hands. The funny part is, it was special teams that won it for him, right? Because it was a run back
Absolutely.
on a punt. So, but I'm glad to see that they won. It was a bit of a wonky weekend. What with the Lions taking down Chiefs, 21-20. That wasn't anything that anybody expected either, because it's Detroit, uh,
Absolutely.
much maligned but well loved.
Very true. Factual, in fact. Yeah, amazing stuff. I'm totally amazed by what happened. It's fantastic that you have, um, you know, the opportunity to watch these kinds of games and then be disappointed like this in the way it ends up. I mean, it just was something that to behold. But it was a great game that turned into a great game. Sorry, it was supposed to be a great game that turned into a better game, really, when you think about it. Because coming from the excitement of being a Jets fan going into Buffalo, Buffalo's first game, it's at home. They want to undo what happened last year, so they're coming in with a lot of anticipation. The Jets are coming in with a lot of anticipation, and then there's a little monkey wrench thrown into the situation, and then it turns into a better game than probably it would have been if Aaron Rodgers had finished the game, because nobody anticipated that victory by the Jets. It was something that it was a surprise, because as soon as Aaron Rodgers went down, everybody figured, well, that's it for the Jets. The plane has landed and it ain't taking off now, but they did it in great fashion. You're right.
This is one of those Spanish Inquisition games, because
Speaking of
no one
Spanish,
expected.
no, speaking of Spanish Inquisitions, the Dallas Cowboys, boy, the Giants, I think they're gonna have a name change after that game. Boy, were they
Yeah.
minuscule in that game. They were pathetic. 40 to nothing. Who do they think they are, these Giants? They think they're the Edmonton Elks of the Canadian Football League?
The bad news bears. No, they were actually a nice surprise last year. I actually made a little bit of money off them. I rarely bet, but when they made the playoffs for the first time since 2016, I was like, why not? Let's have a little bit of fun with it. But yeah, they drafted an impact player at cornerback, center, and wide receiver. They traded for Darren Waller. They signed several free agents to shore up their defense. But they fell rather flat. And I think that I'm being a little kind here. You don't get much flatter than losing in a shutout
How do
to
you
the
score 0 points
Dallas
in a football game? How do
Cowboys.
you get 0 points in a football game, and at least twice you were in the red zone?
The only thing I can think of,
Twice.
honestly, is that the football gods really hate them.
Can't
Like,
hit a field goal even. I mean, it just, it was crazy. I saw parts of that game and I just had to. No, can't watch this. This is crazy. I can stand
104
this.
yards.
I can stand it in the Canadian Football League, but I can't stand it in the NFL. The NFL games are bad enough, but when they're like this, is just, oh goodness gracious, come on. Anyway, so the NFL has two surprises. The Cowboys very strong. The Jets survive the injury to their top-notch quarterback, and the Bills fans once again go home disappointed after losing a game they thought they should have won. Speaking of disappointment, two games against Texas and the finish is the same. Jays having trouble with the Rangers. They're still in the hunt, but they got the Red Sox coming up, a team that they had difficulty earlier in the season, and then now in the last series they did well. They swept them, but that was after they lost 6, and then they finally won 3. So I don't know, Aaron. They got to beat the Rangers today.
Well, coming into this past weekend, sitting at 8-2 in their past 10 games, of course, the Blue Jays looked like they had solved their dilemma with scoring while runners were in scoring position. Unfortunately, dropping one game 10-4 and the other game 6-3 at home really doesn't help their cause. They were a game up, they're now a game down. The Rangers now have a 4-game winning streak. The Blue Jays, not so much. We're also now only leading the Seattle Mariners by just half a game.
Hmm.
Uh, they only managed 3 hits against Scherzer before he left with right tricep spasms. The news now is that he's apparently been shut down for the rest of the season and the playoffs
Good
because he's
news for the
having
Jays.
issues. Well, good news for anybody who has to play them in the playoffs because Scherzer is a frightening pitcher. But yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those situations where, okay, cool, but it doesn't really help the Jays for the time being. They have to find a way to score with runners in scoring position. They just absolutely have to.
Alex Manoah and the Blue Jays reportedly at odds at the August demotion. I think as far as Alex Manoah is concerned, it's been a full season now, almost 3/4 of the season at least, and I think it's time to put up or shut up.
They demoted him a couple weeks ago. That was back on August 11th. And technically speaking, if you are demoted, you have 2 weeks to report. Um, However, he did not report to Buffalo in a timely manner. Now, this was originally reported as the result of extensive medical testing,
Hmm.
but uh, when he was put on the temporarily inactive list at AAA, people began to wonder if his season was likely over. He thinks he should have been able to. He thinks he should have been able to stay with the Blue Jays and try to pitch his way out of it. Unfortunately, I felt that the Blue Jays, I guess, thought, with a 5.79 ERA and 44 base runners allowed in 23 innings, you're probably not going to be able to pitch yourself out of it unless you're throwing smoke and shutout balls. And things haven't been the same since he plunked that dude in the head a couple months back. There was one HBP. The guy left the game with a concussion, and I don't think Alec has been the same since. I'm not sure if it's a confidence issue. I know it definitely seems like a control issue because he has a lot of trouble locating the strike zone. The spirit is willing, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, but not everything is clicking right now.
I, I I see it a little bit differently. I think this guy's a reclamation project, not for the Jays, but for the next team you'll be with. Because I personally, if I was a general manager and he was giving me trouble to go down to the minors after I sent them, that would be a deal breaker for me. Attitude is attitude and the ability to concentrate on the issues as opposed to expanding the issues rather than worry or discuss or complain about being sent down. Why don't you go down and do what you need to do to get back up again? He can't hide the fact. I don't know who's telling him that he doesn't belong down there, because whoever's telling him that isn't watching him pitch. They're waiting for him at home after the game and they're asking him, how did the game go? Because they don't know what's going on. He needs to rework, and he needs his ego to be set aside. He needs to think about the game and not worry about where he's pitching, but how he's pitching.
Now, this seems to be a common trend with a lot of players that Toronto seems to get. We
The ones
are
that they the
very.
ones that they hand the ones that they hand
Mhm.
the chalice or whatever, or the pedestal. Let me phrase it that way. The guys they slide a pedestal under too soon, this happens. We had a couple of, we're looking at a first baseman right now who's trying to recover from that pedestal. It's hard when you're a young player to be told you're the key. In the case of Manoah, he was their key pitcher. He was the pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays. He's a kid. You put too much pressure on these young players, and this is what's going to happen sometimes. Doesn't happen all the time. That's why some teams still do it, because it sometimes it works out great, but too many times it does not, and it did not this time.
No, and it just seems that the players that we anoint as our next saviors turn into uh, people who seem unable to handle the burden.
It's
You know,
hard enough for some of these players that they brought in with a lot of experience to do that. We've seen a little bit of not quite rising to the occasion of some really big money players that have come here. The team concept is always the safest bet, in my opinion. If you look at teams like Baltimore and other teams like that, that they have great players. They know they have great players. Everybody knows they have great players, but those great players are playing within a team concept as opposed to being anointed, as you put it.
Well, hopefully Alec manages to find his way out of it because he's a genuinely good person. I think he's a really good pitcher when he has his stuff, and it's just a question of him
And
finding
his
his way back.
control. And
Yeah.
his control. And as you said, I think it all comes down to confidence. And the only way to get that confidence back is not be distracted by the fact that you think people don't believe in you. Show them they should. Don't worry about what people think, other than to say, use it as motivation. Speaking of mm, Carey Price, apparently he's given us some news about maybe this injury is going to end this season, and it can't. His career can't be far behind that disappointment.
Well, I mean, he is speaking at a news conference in Brassal Tuesday. Uh, he said that the effects of his knee injury have subsided on a day-to-day basis, where he's now, able to at least walk around. But unfortunately, he's nowhere near capable of manning an NHL crease again. He mentioned the fact that he went to a slow pitch tournament, and unfortunately, his knee actually swelled up for about 2 weeks after that, which made it very difficult for him to operate. I mean, for short periods of time, he seems able to do stuff, but longer term, he's 36 years old now. He's got 3 years left on his contract with a $10.5 million cap hit. Um, like last season, I mean, Montreal is able to put him on LTIR, so he's still able to help the team. But the issue is, I think they'd much rather have him on the ice and goaltending. He's much more valuable to the team in that sense, than anything else. So it's tough. As a hockey fan, I hate to hear it. As a Maple Leafs fan, I'm overjoyed. So there is joy and sadness in this for all of us hockey fans, because you'd like to see him playing again, but thank God he's not doing it to my team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
It's
the
rough.
thing that makes him such an asset to the Montreal Canadiens is having him around in the playoffs. Problem one is that they're not close enough to the playoffs to take advantage of that possibility of putting him in the playoffs. And we know what he can do to an opposition when he's in the net. But he needs a team to get him there. And Montreal
Yes.
has not been able to do that in the last couple of years, and it isn't going to get any easier this year.
No, there's certainly a hill to climb because the division that they're in is one of the toughest divisions in hockey. So,
The
where they come out
division
after
stuff
this.
and the conference is just as, if not even tougher, and is becoming much tougher. The Atlantic Division is sprouting some pretty interesting teams there. There's teams that didn't make the playoffs last year, Aaron, that could make the playoffs this year. As many as two that didn't make the playoffs last year can make it this year. The question is, what two teams don't make it if they do? And Ottawa could be considered a third team that might be able to get in there. So, there could be a big change on who makes the playoffs in the Eastern Division, Eastern Conference, I should say. So it's going to be an interesting year as far as hockey's concerned for those that love their teams that didn't make the playoffs because, hope springs eternal for every team during like we said earlier, this end started great, finished bad, or in the middle we're a little. Anyway, let's talk about the Jets, and they've anointed a new captain.
Yeah. So this is I don't think anybody who follows the Jets would have been surprised by this move, but Adam Lowry has been named the third captain in this iteration of the franchise's history. Since coming back to Winnipeg in 2011 from Atlanta, um, Josh Morrissey and Mark Scheifele are going to succeed Blake Wheeler and Andrew Ladd as alternate captains. Um, this is something that he's played with them for 9 years now, and he's been a rock solid competitor for them. He's been a very capable player. He's been an important presence in the locker room, helping a lot of their younger players through it. Um, And this is a decision that Rick Bowness and management came to after a full year behind the bench. So this is not like they're jumping into something. But yeah, it's really fantastic to see.
It's awesome. It is awesome. Okay, let's move on to, let's see, that was the Jets. The Oilers signed forward Adam Ernie to a professional tryout contract.
So Ernie produced 8 goals and 10 assists with Detroit last season. He spent 4 seasons there. He's a healthy 6'1", 212 pounds, and was a second-round selection back in 2013. So getting a little bit longer in the tooth now. But he was originally drafted by Tampa, where he spent the first 3 seasons of his career. He has 40 goals and 49 assists in 355 career games. So you're looking at a role player, a third line guy. Glad to see third or fourth line guy. He's got a chance to redeem himself and try to get back in and potentially play with one of the greatest players in the world, Zach Hyman.
Absolutely. Buckshot, nice to see you too. We got this guy Buckshot that's Ottawa has. Do you know who he is? I don't know. So this is just a new listener as far as I can tell. He says Ottawa has 2 good teams, the GGs and Carleton, meaning the Ray. He says I can't wait to see Rogers play for the Minnesota Vikings in a year or two. He's gonna go play for the Vikings. Well, yeah, you know as much as we do. I tell you that it'll be interesting. Anyway, those would be 2 teams that because he's going to the Green Bay thing. Like he's looking forward to that Green Bay thing, the Wisconsin thing that you're referring to. Buffalo's a little further away. Let's go to shenanigans and well, wait a minute. Canucks name defenseman Quinn Hughes their 15th captain.
Yeah. So Quinn knew that he was kind of going to be discounted because of his age. He hasn't spent that much time in the league, but he is now their 15th captain. He's the first defenseman to be that since a 3-player rotation in the 1990-91 season that included blue liner Doug Lidster. The last time there was actually a full-time defenseman in the NHL in Vancouver was Kevin McCarthy from 1979 to 1982. So Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, and Thatcher Demko were also in contention. But Talk had said that he was the guy that they were looking for. He served as an assistant for the first time during the 2022-23 season, where he had 7 goals and 69 assists in 78 games. He's proved he's got the goal scoring touch and the point getting touch. Now is time for him to make sure that he comes through with the rest of it. I'm anxious to see what he can do with the team.
Scoring is leadership.
After fashion, but yeah.
I just think there's more to being a captain than that, being a scoring sensation. But anyway, that's just me. Let's take a look at like you like to refer to it, this section of the shenanigans. Loblaws reacts to viral TikTok video. Tell us about it.
So there was an individual who bought themselves a bag of no-name Ripple Cut chips. Everybody knows most bags of no-name Ripple Cut chips tend to be around 180 to 200 grams.
Or supposed
to be. This one weighed in at 103 grams.
Little short.
So, just a smidgen short. There was also an individual who bought a 2-liter of Pepsi, but it only had 1.8 liters in it. Now, Loblaws has addressed these concerns, saying, well, that's not our intention. Something like this, I don't think they would deliberately mislabel the bags. I think it might be more of a quality control issue at their packaging plant. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says, in general, it's not acceptable to underfill a container with a product. For example, having a 200 milliliters of beverage in a 250 ml container, that results in head space of about 24%, or what's known as slack fill in the industry. Loblaw says that they're certainly going to be looking into it and taking a look at the processing plant where this food was packaged for the individual.
I'm not a physicist, or I don't understand this stuff 100%, but what I can assume, I assume it, that if there's more air and less pop, it goes flatter quicker.
which means you buy more of it because you want the fizz. And the same thing goes with chips. They put more air in the bags to supposedly cushion the chips, but
Yeah.
everybody knows there's supposed to be about 4 servings of chips in a bag because they're 50 grams each and it's a 200-gram bag. If you're not getting that, there's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, there should be some sort of fine for that.
Yeah, there should.
The motivation to do it right. But then again, that's interfering in business, I guess. Let's talk about the housing gap to restore affordability remains at about 3.5 million units, says the CMHC.
So what we say when we're talking about a housing gap is the number of homes that you would need to put on the market in order to bring down the housing levels efficiently and sufficiently so that more people can actually afford housing. Quebec needs about 860,000 units. BC needs about 610,000 units. Alberta needs 130,000 units. Ontario's shortfall is only, I say only, but it's only about 370,000 units. But there is a large discrepancy between the number of people that own homes versus the number of people that rent. And that only serves one class, and that's the landlords. And that's not, I don't think, anything we want to actually have.
Well, it's all about supply and demand, right?
Yep.
And the more demand, the higher the higher you can get. It's just that simple. Um, yep. So, and by demand, that means the less houses you have over and above the ones that people want. It's duplicitous to say the least because some people want the houses to be costing more. People who own houses like me, oh no, I want my house to get more and more expensive. It's not fast. It's not growing fast enough. Faster, faster. And then there are people who want to get into the housing industry and they can't because it's just too hard to. Well, we were having this conversation with a friend of ours, and you'll be too young to be a part of this, as I am in this topic that I'm going to bring up. My parents, when they bought their first house, they paid $18,000 for it. My father was earning I think he was earning about 6.5, 7 grand a year, and my mother was earning 4 or 5, which means between the two of them, they were earning, I'm doing the math in my head right now, about 12 grand a year. So that was 3/4 of the cost of the house, right? They could earn in a year. And now you might say that's very little money, blah, 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 and all that stuff. But back then, the disposable income wasn't overcome by taxes the way it is today. So a high percentage of that money that they earned, they got to keep and or spend, right? And now, who actually earns? What couple can bring in $1 million or $800,000, Aaron,
Certainly not anybody that I know.
or 3/4 of that to make the correlation that I'm trying to make?
Yeah.
So getting into the housing market is such a huge challenge, and it's like a luxury. Not that owning a home back in my parents' time, or your parents' time, or your grandparents' time was a privilege, because it wasn't a privilege, right? But it was somewhere between that and a luxury. So somewhere between that. And now it's between luxury and impossible to own a home. It's a whole different dynamic, and it's sad because nothing makes. I'm a firm believer that if you have a decent place to live, enough food in your tummy, and you can bring your kids to a vacation, give them a vacation, we have a lot happier people, and I think we'd take a bite out of crime, because nothing derails crime than being satisfied, not necessarily wanting and wanting too much. Sometimes enough is actually enough.
And you know what? I think you're right. I think one of the ways to work towards that is a universal basic income, but I don't think that's a conversation a lot of politicians and folk are ready to have.
Well, what I'd like to see I'd like to see. Hmm, I think we've talked about this before. I don't know if I talked to you on this about this, or other friends. We had this conversation. I really do believe in affordable housing, not housing that you give people, right? But housing that somebody on minimum wage could afford to buy into, right? And yes, it's difficult to do that, but I still believe that the government should have affordable housing. If somebody could buy a house or invest that money, if they can invest whatever it is that they can put in the house, let's say $1,000, $1,500 a year, and when I buy a house, my house increases in value, by, on average, I guess about 10%, if I just use a number, right? Well, if they could get 10% of that back, it means a lot to them. And if they could have a house, because the fact that you own a house makes it possible to pay for other things, because it's a some people are paying more in rent than some people pay in a mortgage,
Yeah,
which to me which to me just doesn't make sense.
I have a friend who just moved back into Toronto from Hamilton. They sold their house for around $800,000. They're currently paying $4,200 a month in rent. Yeah, and that's in Cabbagetown. So, understandably, a more expensive area of Toronto. But by the same token, their mortgage payments were
That's 50
about
grand a year in rent.
I was about a quarter of what they were paying for a mortgage. I think they were paying $1,300 a month for rent. Sorry, for mortgage, and now they're paying $4,200 a month
That's
for their
I,
rent.
I
It's
find that
ridiculous.
ludicrous, that it doesn't make sense that your rent is that much more than your mortgage. Now, there are gonna be a lot of people screaming at me who hear this. Anyway, look, the point is, and I want to go back to my original point. Having a home and having uh, bills that you can keep up with makes happier people. I'm not asking for government to give people money. I'm just that, because I don't believe in that either, because gifting does not create motivation. But if you have a house and you can afford to take care of it, and you can afford to live in it, it's going to mean something to you, and people, that kind of meaning is redundant, but means something. But it is what it is, Aaron. I mean, I know you rent, right?
No,
Well,
I pay a mortgage.
oh, you do
I
pay a
rent
mortgage.
from the bank.
Right, right. So, yeah, you're in a condo. My
Yeah.
bad. Yeah, yeah. The point being that you're investing in your property, and you're not just spending money, right? You're hoping to get a return, whatever that happens to be. In other words, that money that you're putting in is an investment, but a rent is not an investment. It's
No, I
just
mean,
it's an investment for the people you're paying rent.
we're actually about to start some renovations here, not out of desire, but out of need, out of necessity.
Oh, it's
So
around that time, right?
yeah, yeah, I mean, we bought the place. We bought the place 8 years ago, and it's finally gotten to the point where some of the things that we've kind of been putting off for a little bit because it's still livable have reared their ugly heads, and it's time to um, do a few things here to make sure that I can still wash the dishes in the sink, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
But
those are expenses that happen with a home, but they're while the immediate cost can be a little, intimidating, right? But
oh,
when
for
you
sure.
when you when you take those costs and spread them over a year, a full year, they're not as intimidating, right? It basically not as it may not be a wash depending on what it is, but the point is it becomes part of the investment. You feel like you're still investing in the home. In other words, I'm buying a new dishwasher, or I'm fixing the plumbing in the kitchen. It's going to cost me $1,200, but I'll probably, if I'm lucky and if things work out, I'll get at least 800 of that back. Or all of it, depending on when I sell and the conditions between when I bought and when I sold. So it's just I can't be more empathetic to people, more than who have to pay rent and would love to be able to own a home. Who'd like to be able to be in that position, to be able to afford to live in the home that they own, and their taxes and their expenses fall way lower than what it costs for rent. You know, your costs are a lot lower than rent. And I'm not trying to tell on you. For me, the same thing. I'm a senior citizen. I'm living on basically the basic pension that you can get, and it's a lot easier for me to keep up and not spend a lot of money that I have in my nest egg because I own the house instead of all the costs that are attached to a home in the various ways that you own a home, or you rent the home from the bank, as you said.
This is going to put me firmly in the wrong camp here, and I'm sure some of our viewers will be upset by this, but I'm a firm believer that there shouldn't be a class of individuals who can just make money off owning houses. To me, there's something that feels there's something that feels intrinsically wrong about making money off forcing people to pay you for a place to live. It
Well,
just doesn't sit well.
I understand the point you're trying to make, but
You know where I'm coming from on this
yeah,
topic.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But the same could be said for the people that own Loblaws, making money off people who need to eat. I mean, we're full of those enigmas, right? Those inconsistencies in what seems right. It doesn't seem right that many people now we're really getting going down in the weeds. Oh my God, it's really sad that people who can't afford to buy a home, in many ways, because they can't afford to buy a home, they can't afford to buy enough food. They can't afford a lot of things, and it just seems to me that work is something that people should be able to do and should be able to live a decent life. But sadly, a lot of people work very hard, Aaron, and it doesn't, and they're not there. And it saddens me to see that. I wish there was something I could do, but I could only say, okay, you people take over my house. I'm only going to satisfy a couple of people. I can't help the world. And that's the sad part of it, is no matter how much you want to help, the the challenge is too big. And that's why I say that if there was really affordable housing where people could enter into a mortgage, a very, 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 very small mortgage, Aaron. I'm not talking about, borrowing 400 grand or 800 grand. I'm talking about borrowing $5,000 or $6,000 and paying that off over a couple of years and somehow have some equity. That's all I'm trying to get at. I don't know if I'm explaining what I'm thinking right. Anyway,
I think I understand, Frank.
yeah. So anyway, we're at 42 minutes, so we got a little more time. So why don't we carry on? We fell into the weeds again. Um, Fraser pledges unprecedented housing measures as Trudeau meets Liberal caucus.
So basically, more than 2,000 new housing units should be built in London, Ontario over the next 3 years, as this city becomes the first in the country to sign a deal under the new National Housing Accelerator Fund. So this is akin to what we've been talking about
Right.
before. Um, it's a $4 billion accelerator program that was first announced in the 2022 federal budget, but applications weren't accepted until July. Basically, it allows for building high density housing developments without the need for rezoning, and allows 4 units to be built on a single property, even in low density neighborhoods. London is going to receive $74 million towards this. Um, this coincides with the Liberal retreat in London, Ontario. Yay. And it's designed to help spur development in areas that can potentially support more individuals. With the focus on working remotely now, it's more of a possibility for some of these neighborhoods some of these cities to support this sort of thing. So it should work out in making housing a little more affordable, at least for some folk.
Hopefully, there's nothing wrong with wanting people to find motivation to work and the fruits of their labor actually um, become apparent and visible to them. That would be awesome. We'll see what happens. Um, Settlement finalized in 283 million disabled veterans class action.
So the first of thousands of injured Canadian military vets are going to be receiving disability payment top ups under this $283 million class action settlements. Um, there was a ruling by a federal court judge that said that many veterans who served in certain difficult circumstances, such as on submarines, on Joint Task Force 2, or in areas with high costs of living, weren't being paid the long term disability benefits that they were entitled to. Um, the way that the military calculates long-term disability is that 75% of a member's monthly pay, but the Department of National Defense only used base salary. They didn't include allowances he earns, individuals earned as submarine operators or as special operations operators, or as individuals who lived in areas like Vancouver that had very, very high housing prices. So a lot of individuals are going to see benefits to this. There are unfortunately a lot of people that fell through the cracks, but at least in this particular case here, at least some veterans are going to see top ups, and that's going to be in June 2024 and June 2025. Individuals who feel that they should have qualified but didn't will be able to appeal to get off that list. Um, and that will be seen to in the future once the first two groups have been paid in 2024 and 2025.
Let's talk about the Maritimes, and our Maritimes are under threat from Hurricane Lee.
Yeah, it's big weather coming their way again. There is still some uncertainty with the exact track for Hurricane Lee, but the expectation is that it's going to be making landfall as something slightly less than a Category 3 hurricane, um, and could potentially see itself there by this weekend. The current status is that they have sustained winds of 185 kilometers an hour, which puts it at the lower end of category 3. And there is some expectation that it's going to weaken slightly, but it is still on track to fall in around Yarmouth before heading through Halifax, Fredericton, Charlottetown, and Miramichi. So this is something to keep your eyes out for.
BC is aware of dike problems before destructive flooding in 2021. They should have known better.
They definitely should have. Documents obtained by the BC office of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives show a registered professional engineer found numerous problems back in 2018 with dikes protecting the community in the province's southern interior. This is around the city of Merritt. Um, the individual in question, the engineer, reiterated, the same concerns in 2019, 2020, and 2021, just 5 months before flooding that forced more than 7,000 people out of the home.
Wow.
It's repeated warnings that were ignored by the government at the time. So, um, this is in a province that has an extensive network of dikes and dams, and repairs and developments like that. Unfortunately, have a very high price tag. So these ongoing concerns just weren't addressed.
Her more questions about the investigation into Calgary daycare E. coli outbreak as it continues.
Yeah, this is something that's actually been ongoing for a while now. Um, as of Tuesday, there were 264 lab confirmed cases. There was an outbreak that was actually declared at 11 different Calgary daycare centers back on September 4th. 25 patients were in hospital, with 22 having hemolytic uremic syndrome. Um, 6 patients are currently on dialysis at Alberta's Children's Hospital. Uh, the issue here is that the daycares in question had significant issues and warnings with regard to food handling in the months leading up to this outbreak, and nothing was done about it. So um, investigations are currently ongoing. The Alberta Health Services haven't confirmed whether it's an issue with meat or with vegetables that were served to these children. They're still investigating that. Lettuce and spinach are likely to be sources. One of the food kitchens that was being used by the main group here for these individuals, they found insects and vermin in the kitchen itself. This is a horrific situation that never should have happened. Food
Absolutely.
handling is one of the basics. But
Okay, let's do the good news that Danilo Cavalcante has been arrested after 2 weeks on the run in Pennsylvania.
So yeah, this was a man who was he's been on the run for the past 2 weeks. Was just convicted of murder and managed to escape. Um, the good news is his heat signature was picked up around 1 a.m. By an aircraft. Unfortunately, storms prevented a lot of people from getting to him, the police from getting to him, but search dogs were able to neutralize him. He was trying to escape by crawling through thick underbrush, hoping that the police wouldn't be able to follow him, but he didn't count on a dog, which grabbed him by the head and refused to let him go.
Yikes.
Good
Oh,
doggy.
oh boy. All right, Aaron, thanks for doing this.
Hey, glad to be here again, Frank.
He's everyone in Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank Live, airing Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for Candid Frank Live. Other news and entertainment sports programming, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca and also subscribe to Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Ciao for now. See how long you can hold that, Aaron.